Hey everybody, hope that you are doing well. We are kind of rounding out the end of the course. We have this week and then next week, and then that's all she wrote. Today we're going to be diving in and actually a lot to talk about. I'm really not happy that this has to be condensed into, effectively 15 minutes, but we're going to be talking about civil rights and civil liberties with a particular focus on the Bill of Rights. So let's jump in. So the Bill of Rights is God, one of the most quintessentially American documents that exist. I'd put it right up there with the Declaration of Independence. So it is part of the Constitution. The Bill of Rights is, of course, the first 10 amendments or changes to the Constitution. It was, excuse me, not part of the original Constitution that was ratified, but these amendments were quickly adopted by the U.S. government and then ratified by the states. And so the Bill of Rights are protections that we get from the government, and they were really essential. You had the whole anti-federalist and federalist debate, and there were a lot of people who were very concerned of a strong central government, which our government has, and that the government would abuse the rights of the people, which makes sense given our experience under the British Empire and the American Revolution, which was arguably all about rights. And so a lot of people were not really too keen on having a constitution without a Bill of Rights. And so James Madison, over the course of the debates over ratifying the Constitution, does declare that if the Constitution is adopted, that he will push for a Bill of Rights. And so James Madison, to this day, is actually known as the father of the Bill of Rights. He's probably the biggest person who put the legwork into drafting the Bill of Rights and actually working to get them ratified. So I'm going to kind of skip through this. There's a slight difference between liberty and rights. The Bill of Rights is actually more civil liberties, which are protections from the government. And I accidentally clicked through that slide too quickly, but that's okay. You can go backwards. The biggest influences that we have over the Bill of Rights are, and the biggest thing is really this guy right here, George Mason. And I did attend George Mason University for a bit, so that's always fun. But he wrote the Virginia Declaration of Rights, which was part of the Virginia Constitution. And it's almost like an early model for the Bill of Rights, kind of has a lot of the same ideas, again, protections from Virginians against the government of Virginia. And so a lot of the ideas that actually make it in our National Bill of Rights are originally in the Virginia Declaration of Rights. Also, and we can't linger here, but for Thomas Jefferson's Statute of Religious Freedom, that is huge and is kind of the foundation for our understanding of freedom of religion. So now this is huge, and this is probably the most debated thing that we have, and that's, we have rights, we have freedoms, but there is no such thing, and some people struggle with this concept. There is no such thing as an unlimited or a pure freedom in this country. So you have the freedom of speech, you have the freedom of religion, you have the right to bear arms, you have all these countless freedoms and protections, but these are not unlimited rights. These are not unlimited protections. So whatever right, whatever freedom you have, there is always some sort of limit to it. And some people struggle with this. So you have the freedom of speech, right? You can say a lot of things. You have the right to effectively speak your mind, to criticize the government. Think about it. You are allowed to criticize the president freely in this country. You can openly critique, fairly or unfairly, the most powerful leader in our country. No consequences, no ramifications. That's kind of a cool right. However, there are limits to, you name your freedom, there are limits to them, right? So you have the freedom of speech, right? But you don't have the freedom to completely lie or make things up without having some sort of ramifications for that. If you tell a harmful lie about someone that and you just make something up and it's malicious, let's say I have a company and you openly lie and say I did some work for you that I didn't do and that it was really poor quality, I can actually sue you, right? That's slander. So even though you have the freedom of speech, you can't do anything that you want. You have the freedom to worship whatever you want to. You can make up a religion and worship that if you like to. But you're not allowed to have a religion that would require you to, assault people or to torture animals or to do, you name it. You have the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. That does not, though, give you the freedom to have a nuclear weapon, for example, or a rocket launcher. So whatever freedom you have, there's always some sort of limitation to it. A general rule of thumb to kind of tell where one right ends and another begins is your freedom ends when it starts to harm the rights or the freedoms of somebody else. So the freedom to wave your arms ends at somebody's fist. So you have the right to free speech, which you could argue would include your right to play music, right? But you do not have the right or the freedom to blast music in a neighborhood at 2 a.m, right? You couldn't, if the cops showed up, you couldn't say First Amendment, freedom of speech. I also, as your neighbor, have the right to sleep. And so half of the issues that we have in this country deal with a debate over where freedom ends, where one person's rights begin. You are seeing this right now a lot with the issue of quarantine. You have some people arguing that quarantine and some of the measures that the government has taken are infringing on constitutional rights that they possess. I'm not going to weigh in on that one, but that does come down to a debate over the freedom of the Bill of Rights. So what I want to do really quickly, and I'm sad that we don't have much time to go into much great detail, but I do want to go over what protections you have in the Bill of Rights, and that should just about do it. So this is a huge oversimplification. Normally we would do this over the course of 2 classes, but we're going to do it in 7 minutes, I guess. So we're skipping that. Okay. So first 3 amendments. I would argue the most important one is the First Amendment, certainly the most famous. So you get a number of rights from this one: freedom of religion, freedom of speech, press, assembly, and petition. By the way, fun piece of trivia: the press, so news, is the only profession that is actually mentioned in the Constitution. You have the freedom to speak your mind. Assembly means to gather or to get together. Some people who actually argue that the quarantines are unconstitutional would cite that. Petition is effectively to complain and to ask for the government to change something. Religion, there's actually 2 parts of the freedom of religion: the free exercise clause and the establishment clause. Those are 2 separate things. What the establishment clause means is the government is not allowed to favor any one religion or any religion over the other. So this prevents the government from taking action. The free exercise clause, over here too, is a right that you have. So you can worship whatever you want. If you want to worship a lamp, you can do that. If you want to be Christian or Jewish or Muslim or an atheist, you can do that. That gives you that right. Second Amendment, I'm going to move faster through these. This one's hotly debated, but effectively you have the right to own weapons for either self-defense or, as it states here, as part of a militia. That has been held up by the Supreme Court to grant a right of like owning a weapon, for example. Again, that one's pretty hotly debated. The Third Amendment, and if you had to lose an amendment, it would probably be this one. This is effectively an artifact from the American Revolution. The government is not allowed to quarter or to force you to house soldiers unless it's during a time of war. That did happen during the American Revolution. That one's not referenced very often. The Fourth Amendment, which this one's my favorite one. This one, quite simply, is search and seizure. This is a huge element of your right to privacy. The government is not allowed to search through your belongings, your possessions, without a search warrant. So then for that, you need probable cause, which is a whole other thing. But effectively, think of it this way: if a cop thinks that you committed a crime, they can't go through your house unless they have a warrant, which is signed off on by a judge, or unless there's probable cause. If you get pulled over and the cop asked if he can search your car, you have the right to say no because of your Fourth Amendment right. The Fifth Amendment, you may have heard the phrase, I plead the fifth. That comes from this one. This one has a number of different protections that are granted for American citizens. Number one, you have the right to a grand jury. Look that up because we don't have time here. Double jeopardy, that's the fact that you can't be tried twice for the same crime. So if you're found not guilty, they cannot just keep retrying you. Self-incrimination, they can't make you testify against yourself. That is when you plead the fifth, that's what that means. So if you are tried, you don't have to actually testify in court. And then this down here is actually the right to eminent domain. They can't take your property without some sort of compensation. Okay. Cruising on through, the Sixth Amendment deals a lot with the criminal justice system, as does the Fifth. Actually, you get a speedy and public trial, so they can't just say you're guilty and sentence you. That has to be in the public so people can make sure that nothing shady is happening. You also have the right to an impartial jury in the area that the crime was committed. So if you commit a crime in Kentucky, you will be tried in Kentucky. And again, you do have the right to a jury. Okay. You have the right to confront witnesses. So if someone says that you did commit a crime, your lawyer gets to actually interrogate them. They have to testify. And you also have the right to a lawyer. Okay. The Seventh Amendment effectively says that you also get a trial by jury in any sort of civil law. So this is for lawsuits. So if you sue me, and it says $20, this has been adjusted for inflation. You may notice that if you watch Judge Judy or Judge Joe Brown, that there's no jury there. That's because that is a small claims court. In fact, if you watch those shows, it's never any amount, usually more than $500. Anything more than that, you actually have the right to a jury. Eighth Amendment, really straightforward. No cruel or unusual punishment or excessive fines. So if I steal a candy bar, they can't sentence me to a life sentence. That would be seen as cruel and unusual. You maybe remember from a previous lesson that is a little bit debated. The Ninth Amendment is one where people get really tripped up on. I call this one the James Madison Amendment. And it's kind of ironic. James Madison, who is known as the father of the Bill of Rights, actually did not want to have a Bill of Rights. I say that again. He did not want to have a Bill of Rights in the Constitution. A couple of reasons. One, he didn't think it was necessary. We have separation of powers that already protects the people from government oppression. But his bigger concern was that you have an issue. If you say, okay, here are your 10 rights, then he was afraid, and other people were afraid, that you could almost use that as a negative, right? Like nowhere in the Constitution does it say clearly that you have the right to privacy. So he was afraid that people could say, oh, it doesn't say you have the right to privacy, so therefore you don't have it. So what the Ninth Amendment says is just because a right is not stated or enumerated cannot be taken to mean that you don't have that right. Meaning you have more rights than what are merely listed in the Constitution. Finally, the 10th Amendment is, of course, federalism. Any power not clearly given to the national government is reserved for the states. And actually, that's going to do it for us. That was the Bill of Rights in a nutshell, which I feel like I should lose my teaching license for covering the entire Bill of Rights in less than 15 minutes, but this is kind of the hand that we've been dealt. So I do apologize for the lack of time that we have for this, but I would encourage you to read through the Bill of Rights. I do have an interesting case study that you guys will be dealing with, talking about how you have limits to your freedoms, and not every right is straightforward. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. I hope you guys are doing well and making the best of this quarantine. Please send me an email if you have any questions, and I do have office hours every day at 1. The instructions are online for how to access that. So have a good day. I hope you guys are doing well.